What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another GGF video, and today I'll be doing a quick unboxing on the ROG X870E APEX motherboard. Now, this board has had a bit of hype as of recent. It is brand new. I think it's just hit the market, I think this week or maybe last week, mainly because I believe this is the first ROG AMD board from the APEX lineup. So we've had Intel for quite a while. I've got a couple of Intel ones over here, which we will compare to, but we'll just quickly go through and have a look what's inside the box first, and then we'll compare the rest of the boards and then go over this one. As you can see, I have not even taken this board out yet. It's still got all the protective stuff on. I just want to see if there's anything. I don't normally go through the box. I just want to see if there's anything cool that might be different that you aren't used to seeing. Wi-Fi stuff, nothing fancy. Manuals and all that. Anything in this one? Nope, nothing really fancy. I did get one thing out that looked pretty cool. Let's get the board over here. I do have a light above me, which is kind of a pain. It is reflecting off that. This one here. So I think for the last few Apexes, they've been doing this fan kit, which mounts, I'm gonna take a guess, it mounts right there. So I'm not gonna do that right now. I probably won't do it in footage, but it goes there and there. So when this goes like this, it does look a little bit weird. It looks pretty beastie. It looks like a handle or something. But that basically just blows air straight up your memory. Don't know if you really need that. DIMM dot 2, of course. Right, let me peel some of this stuff off so it looks a little bit cleaner. This just tells you about the newish PCIe Q release, how to take it out. There's no button anymore. You don't pull it straight out. You rock your card a little bit and then out it comes. If I can get this one off. All right. So this video, I'm going to be focusing on the APEX, new AMD APEX. I do have another board that just arrived. Oh, I got one on the back here. A new board that just arrived as well. I won't do it in this video. It is the BTF. We'll go this way because that's what it is. It is the BTF B850. So this is AMD. I believe this is AMD's, or from ASUS's first AMD side of BTF board. So we'll look at this. Also requested the Hero as well. So they've got the Hero now, AMD platform in BTF. So it'll be pretty sweet. Of course, the popularity of AMD has sort of skyrocketed over the last year or two. So now we're going to be seeing more of these, I wouldn't say exclusive boards from ASUS and ROG and TUF before, but we're now seeing a lot of their Intel side boards now move over into AMD, like the APEX here, and then also the BTF side of things. So let's have a quick comparison if I can fit all these in. Latest APEX from AMD. My cat is right down here between my legs on the ground. So if you do hear, not literally between my legs, but down on the ground here. So if you do hear some crying, he's just rubbing up against my legs. All right, so we got 3 boards here. Z790, 890, and the AMD over here, trying to jam pack all of those in. Just to show you, I'm not going to compare all the features and all that because this would go on forever. I just want to go over the main aesthetics. Obviously, the latest Intel is all white. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I believe they did that with Z790. I do have the 790. I probably should have got that as well, but that is white. So this is the Z790 APEX Encore that was released a bit after the white on the Z790. Then we have the latest Z890. It's got all the new features, the M.2 Q release, the PCIe Q release, the sliding latches and all that. No button for the PCIe eject. This one does because the Z790 was older. And then we have the latest AMD one over here. So in terms of backplates, it looks like none of the Intel ones here have a backplate. That is a nice aesthetic though. I really do like that. It is a shame that you don't see any of the back of these boards. Let's have a look at the Encore. Nothing so much as fancy there, but if we have a look over this one, we now get a backplate. So that's cool. Backplates, they're nice. They're not really vital. They do add that little bit of extra cooling on the back there with the thermal pad there. So apart from that, heatsink aesthetic, I would say over all of them, I think I like this heatsink aesthetic the best for some reason. It just, I don't know, it's just cohesive. It ties in nicely. Looks really nice. I do like this one as well. As I mentioned in my, recently did their X870E Extreme. I kind of mentioned that they toned down that heatsink a little bit. For the VRMs, it was more flatter, not really aggressive. This one has gone back to that aggressive styling, much like on the X670E Extreme. It's got all those slits, it's got a bit of curvature to it, and it looks really mean. It's got this jagged bit sticking out. That looks really cool. And then I think my least favorite is probably this one here. It's got that really sharp angle where it just shoots straight up. Definitely not as nice as the other two, I think. Probably getting a little bit off talking about the heatsink design and so on. For the heat pipes, it looks like they all run a, it's weird, they all run a single. So the Z790, you can see it just there. Looks like they've got channels for 2 on all of these VRM heatsinks. So there's channels for multiple heatsinks to run through, or the, not heatsinks, the heat pipes, but they've only just used one. The Extreme did have the 2, they just stack them, one on the bottom, then one a little bit higher, and then it runs around. But yeah, pretty much that is the main board aesthetics there. Not too much in terms of glossy areas, which I think is nice. I don't think any of these boards have much gloss. The reflection is now gone here because that was the peel. That looks really nice. It's like a two-tone matte. You've got very matte effect here. Kind of a really fine sandpaper effect here. Matte over here, and then matte all over on the heatsinks, and a little bit of glossy bit you can probably see on this bit right here that says crosshair. All right, moving on to some of the specs. I don't want these videos to go too long. I think 10 minutes is about good for one of these motherboard unboxings and quick looks. Talked about the aesthetic. Now, all of the Apexes are not eATX, so they're standard ATX, which I think is good. They saved that for their extreme boards. The backplate I covered. For the new M.2Q features, I talk about these in all of my unboxings. Now, for those who watch them all, probably think, yeah, I go on and on and on, but some people may only tune in for one board that I cover. So I do like to cover them each time. So there's the M.2Q release, which is this one. That's always on the primary. So that's on most of the ROG boards now. And I've got that tough board, which I think is on that as well. So that's always nice to have. That's just on the primary. These ones down here are all done or locked in by screws. The reason why they do leave these ones screwed in, because there's multiple M.2 slots under this, it's easier to get better pressure over them all when you have multiple screws like this. So just the primary is the Q release. Q slide, which is under these. Let's have a look. So because this first one is a 2280, there's no Q slide on this one. So the Q slide basically just allows you to slide to the right size of your M.2. So there's actually no Q slide on any of these. So you can see when I put this straight in like that, it just locks in. It'll support the smaller ones. For some reason, if you're running like a 2230, you can move this down to one of the others, but I don't know who's going to be rocking a 2230. They're more for like those handheld consoles and things like that. They've got the 3 there. The Q latch, which is this one, that's the newer one. You don't need to spin it around to lock it in. And then the Q release is the one where you drop your GPU. It's only on, it's actually on both of these slots. Some more affordable boards, they only put it on the primary one because that's the one people are going to use the most. Drop your GPU in. There's no quick release button like over on these older boards. So as you can see, that is releasing that slot. Now you just slightly rock the GPU to the back. You don't pull it straight up because it's not going to release this. So pretend this is GPU, rock it a little bit, and then you lift it up. That's all you have to do, and it comes out very, very easily. Power delivery, you're looking at 18.2 plus 2. I think the Extreme was a fraction higher, so it's not as high as the Extreme, but 18 is going to be enough. These AMD CPUs really don't draw as much power as some of the older ones. Now, when I say that, I'm pretty sure if you're doing LN2, overclocking the hell out of it, you probably will draw quite a lot. For the memory, it's 2 DIMM, of course. All of the Apex, most overclocking boards are only 2. you do get better memory frequency. It's up to 128. So 128 for the newer 64GB modules. I'm not sure if any memory companies have them yet. On the 4 DIMM boards, that'll give you 256. So 128 on this. Memory speeds up to 8200 on 9000 series and 96 on 8000 series. And then you might be wondering, why is it higher on 8000? 8000 series AMD chips, there's not many of them. I think they're only for OEMs. That's because they had a single die. Slightly better to get higher frequency for memory for that. Now, there's no nitro path DRAM technology on this board. I spoke to someone at ASUS about that, and they said for the 2 DIMM boards, it doesn't make any improvement over the 4 DIMM. So for the 4 DIMM, you get that 400 megahertz better performance for the frequency with that nitro path tech. For the 2 DIMM boards, they don't need that. Doesn't make any difference to that, so that's why they don't have it on there. And then this other slot over there here, which I mentioned a few times, people pick this up in my builds. This is the DIMM.2 card. It takes 2 SSDs either side, and that goes in there. When I cover the SSDs, I'll talk about that. This is nothing to do with memory, so don't try sticking memory in a slot like this. But I'm sure if you are picking up this board, you probably know what you are going to be doing anyway. All right, for the PCIe, this is very similar to the Extreme, which I covered for the PCIe layer. So you get 2 PCIe 5, 5.0, 5.0, both 16 by slots. This one is, I would say, 8 by, and the top one is 16. So you populate the 16 only, you're going to be running at full 16. You run both slots, you're going to be running at 8 and 8, same as on the Extreme. You get a PCIe 4 by 4 slot and a PCIe 3 by 1. So 1 by slot, 4 by slot, adding cards, anything you like. These are on their own. These don't share with anything, so you won't be dropping speeds or you won't be losing an M.2. Now, what is shared, which is the same as on the Extreme, is when M.2 3 is enabled, which is this one here. The PCIe 1, which is this one here, will run at 8 by, and then this one will run at 4 by. So if you use this slot, this will drop down to 8, this will drop down to 4, and then if you run 2 and 3, which is these two, the top slot will run at 8, and this one will be completely disabled. So you have to keep in mind that if you want to populate 1, 2, 3, or at least these 3 M.2 slots, you'll drop this one down to 8, and then this one will be disabled. And this is where the DIMM.2 will come in handy, which I'll talk a little bit later on. And as for the gen for these M.2s, you're looking at Gen 5, Gen 5, Gen 5, which is pretty sweet that they are all they're all Gen 5 for those M.2s. And then for the slots that they were Gen 5, Gen 5, and then Gen 4, then Gen 3. And moving on to the M.2s, I did talk a little bit about those. Just to recap, Gen 5, Gen 5, Gen 5. On this card here, it's weird that this isn't the same one as on the Extreme. So the DIMM.2 on the Extreme was the newer quick release heatsink design where you didn't have any of these screws. I just would assume they used the same one. So if you watch that video, you can literally take this whole heatsink assembly off by undoing a latch, and it all comes off. This one is dedicated sides, one on each side, and your drive just simply goes in like this. That's it. Actually is running. It doesn't even have any of the newer Q standoff, so you do have to use the supplied screws that lock it in. Once you get one on each side, both of these are Gen 4, Gen 4. These aren't shared with anything. Then you just pop it into the slot. It is keyed like this. Might look a bit weird. I do have that side of the heatsink off. And then you obviously screw this back in before you put it on, and that just goes like that. I don't use these in a lot of my builds because, as I mentioned on my other motherboard unboxings, that it's quite large and overtowering. And sometimes if I'm trying to showcase the memory, like this Corsair memory is quite low profile. So if I had this right here trying to show off some memory or something, it really does tower over it, and you can't really see the memory, especially if you're looking at something like a side-on view like this. It completely covers it and you can't see it. And a lot of my builds don't need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 M.2 SSDs. And this one will also support, the DIMM.2 supports 22110, which is the larger size. So as you can see, I put this one in there. Here it goes up to that slot. You can move the standoff further, and it even says 22110 for that. Right, moving down to the network, you're running Realtek 5 gigabit. Now, when it comes to I/O on these Extreme boards, you are going to be wouldn't say losing or lacking features, but they're more trimmed down. This is an overclocking board, so they're not going to have all the bells and whistles like the Extreme. If you're on a board that does everything, then the Extreme is probably more for you, but it does have the Wi-Fi 7, 320 megahertz bandwidth speed, and that's up to 6.5 gigabits for the transfer rate. Now it does also use, I think this is a standard now on all of the ROG boards, even down to the Tufts. I don't think I use many other boards apart from ROG and Tough. It has the newer, I'd say this is a quick release. It's probably a Q named something. Just push it in and then you're done. I think all the brands are doing this now, and then you just pop it off. But for me, I don't really unplug my Wi-Fi all the time. Well, I guess I do when I'm doing a build. I normally set up my Windows using Wi-Fi, so I actually do every build I do. I plug the Wi-Fi in and out, but I think for most home users, they probably don't really remove their Wi-Fi antenna. But in saying that, if you got this on a test bench, you're testing multiple motherboards and CPUs, having that quick release for the Wi-Fi will probably come in handy. USB. Now, this is where it might be lacking as well for USB compared to something like the Extreme. There's a total of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 USB, I believe, on the back. So you have two USB 4, which is a 40, so they're Type C, which is that one and that one. You have a USB 10, which is that one, and that's included in the 6 USB 10. So there's 5 Type A's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there is the one Type C. So 5 and the 1 gives you the 6 USB for the 10. And then we have 2 USB 5, which are the 2 blues, and they're Type A as well. So not too bad when it comes to rear I/O. And then you have PS2 for your keyboard and mouse. People might say, hey, why do you even need that? I believe when it comes to overclocking, using less of the USB and so on is better. And PS2 for the keyboard and mouse, I still believe gives you better response, and it's not going to be using any of the USB interfaces on the board. And then we also have the clear CMOS, which is this one, and then the BIOS flashback. Once again, BIOS flashback is good. You've got the BIOS related port there. So you put the BIOS on a USB stick, put it in this port. Don't need anything plugged in, no CPU, no GPU, no nothing, just enough power. Then you hold this down and it'll flash the BIOS for you, and then your audio ports there. For front USB, 2 Type C, one here and one here. One is 20, and that'll do your 60 watt power delivery using the supplied 8-pin here. And then you also have a single front USB-C 10. So it's pretty good. You're still getting the 2. And then you got dual USB 3, one here and one right angle here for your 5 gigabit headers for the front panel. So that is pretty much it on this board. For some other controls, overclocking controls and so on. So of course you got your start, your what's this one normally? The flex key? Yeah, flex key, that's defaulted to reset. You can set that to what you want. Your postcode display, I would expect that to be on a board like this. And then we have a bunch of other switches here, down below here, also more here. It's probably like LN2 mode, slow mode, all of that stuff. And then we also have our contact points here for your direct voltage readouts. But I think that is it. I want to know your thoughts. Do you think it should have come out in the white like the first Intel variant did? I'm not sure if we're going to see a Z890 APEX Encore like we did on Z790, but I guess being the first one in AMD, they probably wanted to bring it out in the black, because I still think black is probably the most preferred color. But anyway, price on this board is $750 US. Compared to the Extreme that I covered a few weeks ago, I didn't know the price on that. I was guessing around $1,400. But apparently the Extreme is $999, which is better than I thought it was going to be. So $750 for this, or the basically $1,000 for the Extreme. But let me know what you think. But anyway, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank ROG for sending this board out to check out, and we'll see you in the next one.